Urgent! Ukrainians are leading Europe's new military legion. The strength of our people has been recognized worldwide. Poland has stunned with its statement. The Kremlin's worst nightmare is here. NATO is in the past and Europe is building a new army, led by Ukraine's elite forces. Shock! Ballistic missiles heading for the Kremlin. We've done it. Ukrainian forces have reduced Moscow and St. Petersburg to ashes. But this is only the first phase of Russia's destruction. Megacities are being targeted by something that made Putin's legs buckle. It has happened. What Fedorov started, our top commanders have continued. Khmara and Madyar have placed the Russian Federation's surrender plan on the table. Our forces have prepared something for the Russians that will remove Putin from the Kremlin. This will tighten the noose around Putin's neck. All of this is in our episode of Hellpoint. Shock! Sikorsky stunned everyone with his statement. A new military legion is being created in Europe. Ukrainian soldiers are main striking force of this super army. A decisive challenge has been issued to Moscow. Ukraine is the new guarantor of Europe's security. The world recognizes the power of our fighters. Watch for all the sensational details.
NATO is no longer the authority. The new guarantor of Europe's security should be Ukraine, which has the most combat-ready army in the region. Instead of Washington, Kiev is now taking the lead. The fact that there is no more reliable protection than the armed forces of Ukraine on the entire continent is obviously understood by Ukraine's neighbors as well. Yes, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski has advocated for the creation of a European Legion, which, among others, Ukrainian veterans will be able to join after the war ends. Speaking about today, the country's leadership also understands that their own efforts are necessary, but the only way to survive is to continue supporting Ukraine.
Today, the eastern border with Russia and Belarus is a closed territory through which no one will be able to penetrate. We proudly tell everyone who wants to violate our borders, you will not succeed. Among the key elements of Poland's security are reliably protected borders, real allied relations, and a wise foreign policy. This is the Eastern Shield that we are building with our partners. This is the Baltic Center and joint NATO operations in the Baltic Sea, which make the territory where Russia poses a threat safe. And of course, no one can doubt that supporting Ukraine in the war with the Russian Federation is our security.
As practice has shown, relying solely on the US for many issues has proven to be simply dangerous, even as a NATO member. How Washington will behave today if Putin decides to attack the alliance remains a mystery to many, and this scenario, unfortunately, is quite realistic.
There is stagnation on the Ukrainian front, there are no successes, and Putin sees the need for some new small victorious war. And this could push Russia.
At the same time, in Poland, they believe that the country needs to be urgently militarized to avoid a real war. That is precisely why they are firmly advocating for the creation of a European Legion, specialized permanent armed forces that could recruit experienced professionals. And you won't find anyone more experienced than the Ukrainians.
All this experience that the Ukrainians have, to some extent, the Russians have the same experience. Therefore, this is a threat that exists for NATO countries, and they assess and understand it adequately. That is why they are building a defense system using Ukrainian experience. Of course, it is better to do all this together with Ukraine. It will be faster and more reliable.
By the way, recent statements from Poland regarding the fact that it is time for NATO to shoot down Russian missiles over Ukrainian territory are giving many people hope. If the decision is indeed made, it would be a good step for the future of the alliance.
Here, well, air defense is of course in first place, but I would like these coalitions, when we are really talking about the interaction of a group of countries that can be both NATO members and non-NATO members, but still interact, to have a truly practical nature and a nature that would unfold over time, well, at least in some foreseeable future, rather than being dragged out for a long time. Because as we can see, yes, any vulnerability, any gap or failure in defense where the Russian Federation can squeeze in, it will squeeze in there.
It is worth understanding that Poland and Ukraine's closest neighbors are interested in such alliances also because they know firsthand what it is like to fight against the Russian Federation. These countries have already seen Russian missiles and drones in their airspace multiple times and understand that they will not be able to cope with them alone.
Obviously, the Poles who are closest to us have already experienced firsthand what the Russian Federation is when not only drones but also missiles have flown into their territory. Accordingly, Romania also knows about this, as it also observes very well how the south of the Odessa region is being bombed. And this happens very often. That is, today we see that the Kremlin's aggressive plans have not gone anywhere.
Such prospective military alliances are also beneficial for Ukraine. Our military command believes that if such an initiative is indeed launched, it will benefit both NATO and Ukraine, further strengthening the armed forces of Ukraine.
We must create, for example, military political alliances with the Baltic countries as potential first victims who could suffer from new Russian aggression. We must talk about this with Poland. Well, that's just how it happened. Unfortunately, we have this kind of neighbor, and he is right there across the border. Therefore, such actions, I think, would also sober up the Russian aggressor, among others.
The idea looks especially relevant against the backdrop of the reduction of the American military presence in Europe. The second most prepared army after the US today remains the Ukrainian one.
It happened. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry is tearing Moscow and St. Petersburg to pieces. Drones have turned Russian megacities into hell. But the worst for Putin is only just beginning. This was just a fiery warm-up. Our forces are already aiming heavy Ukrainian ballistics. Russian air defense will not save them. When this folder was placed on Putin's desk, he grabbed his head. The countdown to the moment X has begun. Watch for all the details.
Moscow, St. Petersburg, and one of the largest Russian ports. Tonight, Russian air defense was once again trying to catch Ukrainian drones, although it didn't manage to catch everything. And the geography here is truly impressive. Drones regularly appear over the Russian capital, reach the Leningrad region, and increasingly strike targets deep inside Russia.
The Russian side claims that more than 500 drones were shot down overnight. This indicates a sharp increase in the capabilities of the Ukrainian defense forces in terms of launching strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation.
Moreover, it is the things that affect Russia's economy and logistics that are suffering. A striking example is the Ust-Luga port, one of the key Russian ports on the Baltic Sea.
The primary shipment flows for both petroleum products and accordingly liquefied gas destined for end consumers are now routed to pass directly through the Ust-Luga terminal. And it is certainly no mere coincidence that the Russian side was ultimately forced to publicly admit that the Ukrainian attack was highly effective. At this very moment, extensive and relevant work is being urgently carried out on the ground to contain the situation and to prevent the fire from spreading any further across the facility.
It is costing this Russian logistics. Tonight, a wild berries facility in the Tver region was damaged, and this is already the third such incident in 2 weeks. The Russians are in tears.
Such black smoke is rising in a column. It couldn't withstand it. Our wild berries is on fire. There is such smoke in that direction.
But the main thing is something else. The Russian deep rear is gradually ceasing to be synonymous with safety.
It should be noted that there are up to 100 Russian military-industrial complex enterprises located in Moscow. Moreover, these are the most science-intensive enterprises, and they are legitimate military targets for the Ukrainian side. Therefore, it is no coincidence that the intensity of strikes on Moscow and the Moscow region will increase significantly.
Meanwhile, in the occupied territories, Ukraine has taken on the Russian energy sector. According to the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brovdy, just in the last few days, 29 more energy hubs have been hit in Crimea, as well as in the Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia regions. And in total, since the beginning of July, 240 energy hubs have already been hit. But the consequences of the attacks do not end where the fire begins. A fuel crisis has once again gripped Russia, specifically Moscow and the surrounding region. And even imports from other countries haven't really helped much.
Moscow, Butyrskaya Street, Savalovsky Station, please. The queue. The gas station is closed. I don't know, a fuel truck is unloading there. There are a bunch of gas stations where people are just abandoning their cars out of desperation. Cars are leaving empty, people are going home. Well, there's no gas, there's none anywhere in the city.
And here are the results of the strikes on the ports. In Novorossiysk, after the attack, the two largest grain terminals suspended operations. And now Russian market participants are complaining. Grain is not being shipped and cargo is just sitting there.
The situation with the grain market is not improving, although some farmers still continue to believe that the price is about to go up, despite the fact that there are absolutely no real prerequisites for this.
Strikes on Novorossiysk are effectively pausing the Russian Federation's ability to sell its agricultural products to end consumers.
And an interesting picture emerges. Ukraine is not just trying to reach individual Russian cities. Everything that helps Russia wage war is coming under attack. Ports, energy, logistics, military facilities, and the air defense system itself. And the more such objects they have to defend, the more stretched the Russian defense becomes across the country's territory.
The bulk of the missile and air defense systems are concentrated in Moscow and the Moscow region. Moreover, the Russians admit the fact that their air defense system is patchy. That is, they do not have the ability to cover the entire territory of the Russian Federation, to cover all strategic objects.
And while Moscow continues to count downed drones, Ukrainian strikes are penetrating deeper and deeper into the Russian rear. And most importantly, there are fewer and fewer safe kilometers in Russia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Right now, Khmara and Madyar have launched a hellish tandem. What is unfolding right now in the secret headquarters of the armed forces of Ukraine has made the generals in the Kremlin sit up and take notice. What Fedorov powerfully started, Khmara has triumphantly continued. Ukraine's top commander has prepared such a devastating Armageddon for the occupiers that all of Russia will tremble. The Russians will be forced to carry Putin out of the Kremlin. Watch for the details.
Dark times await the Russian Federation because a cloud is looming over Russia. Yevhen Khmara. After a long silence, the acting Minister of Defense of Ukraine has made contact and sent his regards to the Kremlin. The Major General started with a loud statement that shocked Putin. Literally, Russia will burn, Khmara wrote on his social media. We will shut down the Russian military machine, destroy the infrastructure, fleet, logistics, fuel and energy complex facilities, and enterprises that work for the war against Ukraine. Yevhen Khmara, acting Minister of Defense of Ukraine. A vivid proof of this was the recent raid on Novorossiysk. This is one of Ukraine's most large-scale and demonstrative operations in the Russian rear. As a result of the combined strike, the military infrastructure of the Black Sea Fleet, port facilities, and air defense systems came under fire simultaneously. At least 4 Russian warships were damaged, including 2 frigates. The consequences of the special military operation have now become increasingly evident, profoundly impacting regional stability and the broader geopolitical landscape. They are putting out a fire. The entire city is covered in thick smoke, and it smells really terrible. In an operation unique in its complexity, Neptune missiles, Palyanitsia jet drones, and sea drones were used simultaneously. The attack on Novorossiysk put a definitive end to the rumors that the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine had allegedly paused its special operations after Mikhailo Fedorov.
It is important to understand here there is a political context. When Fedorov was removed, there was a certain panic, apprehension, and fear that now Ukrainian long-range strikes would stop, the enemy would feel at ease, there would be no long-range implementations, there would be no strikes on the rear, and so on. All of this has been preserved, and moreover, it is being ramped up.
Also, the latest drone attack on Novorossiysk made it clear, from now on, the Minister of Defense will press on another pain point of the Kremlin. Yevhen Khmara ordered that following the wild berries warehouses and Russian oil refineries, the agricultural sector of the Russian Federation should also be targeted.
Ukraine, understanding how painful a point agriculture is right now for Russia, for the aggressor, has chosen as one of its targets, not forgetting about oil refineries or wild berries. It has chosen the export infrastructure for grain exports as one of its targets. This is important to understand.
This means that the Russians will be left without bread. Unlike the occupiers, Ukrainian drones and missiles do not strike bakeries. Exports are a different matter. Russian farmers will soon be able to forget about them completely.
After what Ukraine managed to do in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea with tankers, bulk carriers, and other vessels in numbers, I believe, already exceeding 200, it became clear that this is causing shock and very serious consequences for farmers and for agriculture. A full-scale crisis has begun there because it is impossible to export the wheat, and without exports, agriculture in Russia is bankrupt.
And acting Minister Khmara promises that the Kremlin will go bankrupt on a scale never seen before. Russia has proven powerless against the synchronized operation of Ukrainian strike assets. Strengthening deep strikes on Russia is one of the key priorities. Together with Commander-in-Chief Drapati, the General Staff, the SBU, other components of the defense forces and manufacturers, we will increase this pressure. At the same time, analysts assure that Yevhen Khmara has everything needed to achieve the armed forces of Ukraine's rapid and ambitious goal.
Ukraine, through its military capability and investments in the Ukrainian army, has created conditions where we are not just being reckoned with, but we finally have a bargaining chip.
Putin has already lost most of his oil refineries and depots along with their products, and soon he will also be left without the export of grain stolen from Ukraine.
Urgent. The countdown has begun in weeks. Putin is preparing a surprise strike on NATO. American intelligence has released a shocking report. Already this autumn, the mad dictator is planning an invasion of several NATO countries at once. But a hellish response for the Russian Federation is already ready. In Latvia and Finland, troops are being brought to the highest state of combat readiness. What inevitable clash will this lead to? Watch.
On the night of August 14th, a drone invaded Latvian airspace. Russian social media channels immediately wrote, without evidence, that it was a Ukrainian UAV.
In the sky over Latvia, an unknown Ukrainian drone was intercepted by NATO fighter jets.
Since the beginning of summer, this is the second time NATO fighter jets have shot down a drone in Latvian airspace, and in May, a drone was destroyed over Estonia. In total, from January 2025 to May 2026, at least 24 cases of drone sightings were recorded in the Baltic countries, 9 of which occurred last year and 15 since the beginning of the current one. Latvia has become the leader in such incidents. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called the alliance's response to such incidents calm, decisive and proportionate. The Lithuanian Minister of Defense is convinced that after February 2022, life in Europe will not be as quiet as it was before.
This is a new reality that the Baltic countries are facing. We need to adapt because the probability of similar scenarios repeating is very high.
The goal of these provocations is, after all, to intimidate the society of Europe, European countries and NATO countries, and to force public opinion in Western countries to lean towards the idea that, listen, we need to stop supporting Ukraine, and then Russia will calm down too. This is, so to speak, the Kremlin's goal.
The number of provocations from the Russian Federation will only increase. A test of readiness, so to speak. Previously, American intelligence believed that a Russian attack on NATO was impossible while the war in Ukraine was ongoing. But now there is a possibility that the threat is much closer. An attack on one of the NATO countries could happen as early as this autumn. This is stated in an updated forecast by American intelligence.
The assessments, which were reported by American officials, came against the backdrop of a shortage of some critical ammunition needed by the military to confront Russia or China in a potential future war. The US has significantly reduced its stockpiles of these weapons due to supplies to Ukraine following the Russian invasion, as well as due to the US conflict with Iran. According to other officials, the stockpiles of short-range precision-guided missiles and tactical missile systems, as well as short-range Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, are at risk.
Talks about an attack on the Baltic states and testing the strength of the NATO alliance began as early as last year.
It is assumed that after a sustainable ceasefire is reached in Ukraine, the Russian command will redeploy approximately half of the troops currently fighting in Ukraine, which is somewhere around 300,000, to the Baltic front, to the Baltic direction.
And with these infantry waves, they will attempt to occupy the Baltic states. That is the first thing. And reach the borders of Poland or even the Vistula line.
Unfortunately, any kind of ceasefire in Ukraine is still a long way off. Latvia has strengthened security measures around all critical infrastructure, including the dam on the Daugava River near Riga and the Inčukalns underground gas storage facility. Other Baltic countries, Lithuania and Estonia, as well as Poland, are strengthening security measures around dams, power plants, and gas infrastructure, expressing concern that Moscow will carry out a false flag attack on them using captured Ukrainian UAVs. Also, fortifications are being built in these countries on the border with the Russian Federation. Mandatory military conscription is returning, and the military budget is constantly increasing.
At this very second, Operation Crimean Switch-Off is in full swing. Madyar has begun a hellish cleanup. The occupied peninsula is turning into a total trap for the Russians at breakneck speed. Madyar's birds are simply burning Crimea out. Madyar has begun the final phase of the operation to plunge the Russians into darkness and chaos. Watch all the details.
Ukrainian birds are switching off the Crimean breaker. According to estimates by the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Madyar, in the first 2 weeks of August, drones hit more than 200 energy facilities on the peninsula. Among them are the Bakhchisarai TPP, dozens of electrical substations and transformers.
Occupational Noir. Plus, 29 energy hubs in the south of the temporarily occupied territories have been visited by the USF Bird as part of the Crimean Switch-Off operation. During the operation period from July 1st to August 13th, 240 energy hubs were effectively engaged.
Slowly but surely, life on the peninsula is plunging into the Middle Ages. One of the main pillars of the Putin regime is living without electricity, water and fuel.
They need to systematically and constantly control the power supply system, and it is lacking even in some regions. Well, for example, if we take northern Crimea, that's Jankoy, Krasnoperekopsk, and Armyansk, and Razdolnoye, then in those regions there was no electricity in some settlements for even 13 or 14 days. And if they did provide it, they gave it for a couple of hours and then it was gone again.
Against the backdrop of constant blackouts, locals are complaining about both the Crimean authorities and the Kremlin. Both of them are just sitting and watching the humanitarian catastrophe unfold.
Hello everyone. I am a resident of the city of Yalta in the Republic of Crimea. I was also born in this city. We have been sitting without electricity for 8 days now. Naturally, all our food has thawed and spoiled. And I want to appeal to you for help now, because our authorities, naturally, the mayor and the head of the republic, are not reacting to this at all.
The situation with logistics is no better. While the bunker is not listening to the soothing reports of Gauleiter Ballistic about full control over the land corridor to Crimea, Ukrainian drones continue to hunt for Russian trucks and fuel tankers.
All energy facilities have been taken under control. The R-280 road, which supplies Crimea, is under full control today. And I can say, to the credit of the military first and foremost, that the effectiveness of Ukrainian drones has dropped significantly.
Russian long-haul truckers, for whom every trip along the land corridor to Crimea is a mix of Russian roulette and Mad Max, Fury Road, would not agree with Balitsky's lies.
There's no river yet. Come on, river. 3 units are burning here. All right, there's a train. Come on. I can't see a damn thing at all.
Crimea is gradually turning into a territory unsuitable for normal life. The noose is tightening, and the armed forces of Ukraine are urging local civilians to leave the peninsula as soon as possible.
We are not touching the Crimean bridge, if you haven't noticed. Let all those millions go through it, let them go through that little bridge non-stop to their Russia and leave somewhere very far beyond the Urals to live in peace.
That's all from me for now. I'm Renata Aslanova and you've been watching. More hellish news in our next episode. Well, and in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you!